I am 65 years old, and 3 weeks ago I sat on the floor of a stranger's house in Gambia, holding a photograph of my dead husband, while an old woman I had never met looked at me and said, "You are not the first wife he loved here." I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. But by the end of that night, everything I thought I knew about my marriage, 38 years of it, had cracked open like dry earth after the first rain. It started with a young man in a market. It ended with a truth I am still not sure I was ready for. Before I continue, check if you're already subscribed to the channel, and write in the comments which country you're watching this video from. I went to Africa to disappear for a while. David had been gone 14 months. Cancer took him slowly, the way it takes people who have spent their whole lives being strong, piece by piece, until the strength itself is the last thing to go. After the funeral, after the casseroles stopped coming, after my daughter went back to her own life in Chicago, I was left in a house that echoed. So I did what David and I always said we'd do one day. I booked a trip, Senegal, then across the border into Gambia. A photography tour, small group, mostly retirees like me clutching cameras that were nicer than we deserved. I brought his old Nikon, I don't know why. It still had a roll of film in it that he never finished. The market in Serekunda smelled like ginger and diesel and the ocean, all at once. Fabric and colors I didn't have names for. Children weaving through the stalls like they'd memorized every gap between the crates. I was photographing a pyramid of oranges when someone spoke behind me. "You're doing it wrong," I turned. A young man, maybe late 20s, sharp-eyed, a camera of his own hanging from a worn strap around his neck. "Excuse me?" "The light. You're shooting into it. Wait 10 minutes, it'll turn gold." He said it simply, like he wasn't trying to be charming, which somehow made it more charming. "I've been taking pictures for 40 years, young man." "Then you already know I'm right." I laughed. I hadn't laughed like that, sudden, surprised out of me, in longer than I could remember. That should have been the whole story. A funny exchange with a stranger, a good memory to bring home. But he didn't walk away. He was staring at my bag, specifically at the edge of a photograph sticking out of the front pocket. A habit of mine, keeping one printed photo of David with me always, tucked where I could see it. "May I ask," he said, and his voice had changed, gone quiet. "Where did you get that photograph?" "It's my husband. May I see it?" There was something in his face I didn't recognize yet. I would spend the next 2 weeks learning to recognize it. I handed him the photo. He looked at it for a long time. Too long. Then he said the words that started everything. "I recognize him." "That's impossible," I told him. "My husband never came to Africa in his life." The young man, I didn't know his name yet, kept staring at the photo like it might change if he looked hard enough. "What was his name?" he asked. "David. David Green." Something moved behind his eyes. Recognition, or the beginning of it. "I need to show you something," he said. "Please, it's not far." Every instinct I had, every instinct a 65-year-old widow traveling alone should have, told me to say no, to take my photo back, thank him for the light tip, and return to my group. I said yes. I still don't fully understand why. Maybe because grief makes you reckless in small ways. Maybe because some part of me had been waiting 14 months for something to still be unfinished about David, instead of everything being closed, filed, done. "My name is Omar," he said as we walked. "Omar Cisse." "Patricia." "I know," he said. "It's written on the back of the photo." I hadn't remembered that. We walked past the market's edge, down a narrower street, where the noise thinned into the ordinary sounds of a neighborhood. A radio playing somewhere, a woman calling a child's name, laundry snapping on a line. "Where are we going?" "To my grandmother's house," Omar said. "She's the only one who can explain this properly." I could try. I would get it wrong. "Explain what, Omar?" He stopped walking, turned to face me fully for the first time. "Mrs. Green," he said, "I've seen this photograph before. Not this exact print, but this man's face. In my grandmother's house there is a picture just like it. Older, faded. It's been on her wall since before I was born." I felt something cold move through my chest. "That's not possible." "I hope you're right," Omar said quietly, "but I don't think you are." The house was small, painted a blue that had mostly given up under the sun. A woman sat outside it shelling peanuts into a bowl, easily 80 years old, her hands moving without needing her eyes. Omar spoke to her in Wolof, Too fast for me to catch anything except my husband's name, said twice. The old woman went still. Her eyes came up to mine, and I watched 50 years of something pass across her face before she said a single word to me. Come, she said in English. Sit. Inside, the house was dim and cool, walls lined with photographs in frames of different ages, different decades. Omar's grandmother, her name I would learn was Fatu, walked straight to one wall and touched a frame near the corner. This, she said. I stood and I looked, and my legs nearly went out from under me. It was David, younger than I had ever known him. 25, maybe 26, standing on a beach I didn't recognize, laughing at whoever held the camera, a woman's hand visible at the edge of the frame, resting on his arm. When was this taken? My voice didn't sound like mine. 1986, Fatu said. Before you, I think. You knew him? Fatu looked at me for a long moment, deciding something. I knew him very well, she said. He came here for 6 months. He said he was running from something. Young men often say that. Usually it isn't true. With him, I believed it. Running from what? Fatu glanced at Omar, and something passed between them. A permission or a warning. That, she said, is a longer conversation. Sit down, Patricia. You will want to be sitting. I sat. Omar sat beside his grandmother, close, protective, though I couldn't yet tell who he was protecting, her or me. In 1986, Fatu began, your husband was engaged to be married. Did you know this? No, I said. He never told me. To a woman in England. A short engagement arranged more by families than by love, I think, from how he spoke of it. 3 weeks before the wedding he left. Flew here with almost no plan, no money, just a camera and a bag. I thought of the Nikon in my own bag right now, the one with David's unfinished roll of film still inside it. My hands had started to shake. He stayed with my family, Fatu continued. My father rented rooms to travelers. David paid what he could, worked where he could, carrying nets for fishermen, teaching English at a church some mornings. He was lost, Patricia, truly lost. And lost young men either destroy themselves or they find something to hold on to. What did he hold on to? Fatu's mouth curved, not quite a smile. Me, she said. The room went very quiet. We were young, she said. It lasted 6 months. He told me things he said he'd never told anyone, that he didn't know who he was outside of what his family expected, that here, for the first time, nobody expected anything of him at all. I thought of 38 years of marriage, of a man I believed I knew completely. Why didn't he stay, I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. Because his mother became ill, Fatu said. He went home to see her. He promised he'd return. He wrote for a year. Then the letters stopped. He married someone, I said. Not a question anymore. He went home and he married someone else. Yes, Fatu said gently. I assume that was you. I need you to understand what was happening in my chest in that moment, because it wasn't only grief, and it wasn't only shock. It was arithmetic. Omar was 28. This had happened in 1986, 38 years ago. I looked at him, really looked for the first time past the camera around his neck and the easy confidence in his voice, searching his face for David's face. Fatu saw exactly what I was doing. She almost laughed, though there was no cruelty in it. No, she said. Whatever you're thinking, no. Omar is my grandson through my daughter, born 15 years after David left. There is no blood between them. I promise you that, Patricia, because I can see you need the promise. Relief went through me so fast it felt like nausea, but it didn't answer the question underneath the question. Then why, I asked, did Omar recognize a photo of a man he's never met? Fatu looked at her grandson with something like pride, something like sorrow. Because I told him the story, she said. Every child in this house grew up knowing about the Englishman in the photograph on the wall. Omar has looked at that face his whole life. When he saw it again in a stranger's bag, in a stranger's country, so of course he recognized it. I looked at Omar. He hadn't spoken in several minutes. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. I didn't know what I was going to find when I brought you here, he admitted. I only knew I couldn't let you walk away without asking. Are you sorry you asked? He considered the question seriously, the way he seemed to consider most things. No, he said. Are you sorry you came? I didn't have an answer yet. I didn't tell my tour group where I'd been. I told them I'd gotten lost taking photographs and lost track of time. My roommate, a retired school teacher from Ohio named Carol, gave me a look that suggested she didn't believe a word of it, but she let it go. I lay awake that night doing the thing grief specializes in, replaying a life, except now every memory had a shadow attached to it I hadn't noticed before. The year David and I married, 1988, 2 years after Gambia. I had always thought of our courtship as sudden but certain, the kind of love people describe as just knowing. Had it actually been the sound of a door closing quietly behind him, a door with someone else's name on it? I thought of 100 small things. The way David sometimes went quiet in November, every single November, and I'd assumed it was simply his temperament. The unlabeled box in the attic I'd never opened, because he asked me not to, and I respected privacy the way you respect a person you trust completely. The Nikon, he never let anyone else touch. I thought about calling my daughter. I didn't. Not yet. I didn't have words for what I was carrying, and I wasn't ready to watch her face try to rearrange her father into someone new. Instead, at 6 in the morning, I found myself outside Fatu's blue house again. Omar was already there, sitting on the step, 2 cups of tea beside him like he'd expected me. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Could you?" "No," he admitted. "I kept thinking about what it must be like, to lose your husband and then lose him again. A second time. Differently." I sat down next to him. Took the tea he offered. "That's exactly what it's like," I said. "How did you know that?" "I didn't," Omar said. "I guessed. I've been guessing about you since yesterday. My tour had 11 days left. I told the group I wanted to extend my stay independently, that I'd catch a later flight home. Carol raised an eyebrow, but hugged me tightly before she left with the others for the airport, and told me to be careful and be brave, which felt at the time like she somehow already knew both would be required. Omar and I began spending our days together, not because either of us decided to exactly, but because there was too much unfinished between us to simply say goodbye. He took me to the beach in the old photograph. It had changed in 40 years, new hotels crowding the horizon. But the curve of the shoreline was the same, and I understood, standing there, why a lost young man might have felt found in a place like this. "Tell me about your husband," Omar said one afternoon, camera resting in his lap, unused. "Not the man my grandmother knew, the one you married." So I did. I told him about the David who fixed the kitchen faucet himself 4 separate times rather than call a plumber, insisting each time he'd solved it. About the David who cried quietly and privately at every single one of our daughter's school recitals. About the David who held my hand in hospital waiting rooms without ever once saying the word scared, because some men simply don't have that word in their vocabulary, only the shape of it. "He sounds like he loved you very much," Omar said. I thought so. "You still think so," Omar said. "You're just angry that loving you wasn't the first thing he was ever certain of." I looked at him, startled by how precisely he'd said the thing I hadn't managed to say to myself yet. "You're very perceptive for 28, I told him. "My grandmother raised me to listen before I speak," Omar said. "It's a rare skill in men my age, apparently rare in men of any age." He was teasing me. I found to my own surprise that I liked being teased. There is a particular kind of silence that happens between two people who both know a thing neither will say out loud yet. Omar and I had reached that silence by our 5th day together. It happened in small ways. The length of time our eyes held before one of us looked away. The careful distance we kept walking side by side, a distance that felt less like politeness and more like restraint. The way he'd stopped calling me Mrs. Green without either of us commenting on it. I was 65 years old, he was 28. I told myself repeatedly that whatever this feeling was, it had no right to exist, that it was grief wearing a disguise, that I was an old fool mistaking gratitude for something else. I nearly convinced myself too, until the evening he showed me his photographs. Hundreds of them, stored on an old laptop with a cracked corner. Fishermen at dawn, his grandmother's hands shelling peanuts. Children mid-laugh, caught in the half-second before they knew they were being photographed. Every image had the same quality: patience. A willingness to wait for a moment to become true before capturing it. "These are extraordinary, Omar. Nobody here thinks so," he said. "My father wants me to work at his cousin's shop. Photography is what I do in the hours I'm not disappointing him. You're not disappointing anyone. You have real talent. You're only the second person who's ever told me that. Who was the first? He hesitated. My grandmother. The day she showed me David's photograph, actually. She said he was the one who taught her that a camera could tell the truth better than a mouth could. She said I had his eye. The room went quiet in that particular way again. Omar, I said carefully, what are we doing? He closed the laptop. I don't know, he said. But I know I've thought about it since the market. I know it's foolish. I know everyone would tell us it's foolish. I know your husband's ghost is standing in this room with us right now, and I still haven't been able to stop thinking about it. I'm old enough to be your... Don't, Omar said, quiet but firm. Don't say the sentence everyone else is going to say. I've heard it in my head every day for a week. I don't need to hear it from you too. Fatou found out before I told her, the way grandmothers always seem to. She asked me to walk with her one morning, just the two of us, leaving Omar behind at the house. We went slowly, her pace, past the market where all of this had begun. I am going to say something you won't want to hear, she said. I assumed as much. David broke something when he left here, Fatou said. Not just my heart. I recovered from that a long time ago and built a good life, and I do not regret one day of it. He broke his own certainty about who he was allowed to become. He spent his whole life afterward, I think, being careful, being the safe choice, being the man his family and his country expected. That doesn't sound like a broken man to me. That sounds like the man I married. I know, Fatou said gently. I'm not telling you he was unhappy, Patricia. I'm telling you he chose safety over the version of himself he found here. I've wondered for 40 years whether that was wisdom or whether it was fear. Perhaps it was both. Why are you telling me this? Fatou stopped walking, looked at me directly. Because my grandson is about to make the same choice David faced. And I want you to understand what you're truly asking him to consider if this, whatever it is between you two, continues. It is not a small thing, Patricia. People will say cruel words, his father will say cruel words, and you will go home to a different continent, eventually, no matter what happens here. I don't have answers for any of that. No, Fatou agreed. But you should have the questions clearly in your mind before you let it go further. That's all I'm asking. I walked back to the blue house alone, letting her words settle into me like sediment. Omar found me on the beach that evening, the same stretch of shoreline from the photograph, the light doing exactly the gold thing he'd told me it would do that first day in the market. My grandmother spoke to you, he said. It wasn't a question. She did. She's not wrong, you know, about any of it. I know. We stood together, watching the tide come in, neither of us saying the thing that mattered most. I have 8 days left before my flight, I finally said. I know that too. Omar, I need you to understand, I'm not looking for someone to fill the space David left. That wouldn't be fair to you, and I'm not looking to feel young again, using you to prove something to myself. That wouldn't be fair either. Then what are you looking for? I turned to face him fully, and for the first time since David's funeral, I said something true without flinching from it. I don't know if I'm looking for anything. I think I just found something, and I don't know what to do with the fact that it terrifies me, and it's the first time in 14 months I've felt entirely, completely alive. Omar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to something rawer than I'd heard from him yet. I've been telling myself for a week that this is impossible, he said. The distance, the age, my father, your daughter. Every practical reason exists to end this before it becomes something neither of us can undo. And I keep coming back to the market, Omar said. To the moment I saw your husband's photograph and felt something pull in my chest before I even understood why. I don't believe in fate, Patricia. My grandmother does. I never did. But I don't have a better explanation for why I couldn't let you walk away that day. He stepped closer. The tide reached our feet and pulled back again. I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight, he said. I'm asking if I can hold your hand while the sun finishes doing the thing I promised you it would do. I gave him my hand. Neither of us spoke again until the light was completely gone. I called my daughter on the 6th day. I owed her that much honesty, even from 4,000 miles away, even knowing what it might cost me. Mom, you've been gone longer than planned. Is everything okay? I told her everything. The photograph. Fatou. The 6 months her father spent here before he ever knew her mother existed, and finally, haltingly, about Omar. The silence on the line lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Mom," she said eventually, "do you hear how this sounds?" "I hear exactly how it sounds, Rebecca. Dad had a whole life before me that he never told me about," I said, sharper than I intended. "I don't get to know anymore what Dad would be. I only get to decide what I do with the rest of my life starting now." Another long silence. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," Rebecca finally said, softer. "I'm scared for you. That's all it is. I'm scared you're going to give a stranger your whole heart on the other side of the world and come home broken in a completely new way." "I might," I admitted. "I honestly might. But Rebecca, I have been careful my entire life. Careful got me 38 good years and one enormous secret I never knew I was living inside of. I don't want to be careful for whatever years I have left." She didn't agree with me that night, but she didn't hang up on me either. And before we ended the call, she said something I've held on to since. "Just don't disappear on me too, Mom. Whatever you decide, come home first, even if it's just to leave again." My flight was booked for the following morning. Omar and I spent the last day the way people do when they know a clock is running down somewhere just out of sight, quietly, deliberately, trying to memorize things that can't actually be memorized. We went back to the market where it began. He photographed me this time, the way he'd wanted to since the first morning, standing exactly where I'd stood over the pyramid of oranges. And he was right. The light did turn gold eventually, exactly as he'd promised. "What happens now?" I asked him, as the sun dropped low. "I don't know," Omar said honestly. "I know I don't want this to end because a flight schedule says it should. I know my grandmother would tell me that's exactly what your husband did. Let a departure become an ending instead of a chapter. And I don't want to repeat his mistake even though I understand now why he made it. I'm going home tomorrow, Omar." "I know. I need time, real time, not to decide if I want you. I think I already know that answer and it terrifies me. I need time to figure out how to build a life that has room in it for something nobody will understand from the outside." Omar took my hand, there in the gold light, in the market where I'd first heard the words that changed everything. "Then take the time," he said. "I'm not going anywhere, Patricia. I've spent my whole life waiting for something to become true before I photograph it. I can wait for this too." I flew home the next morning with David's unfinished roll of film still in my bag and a new number saved in my phone under a name that hadn't existed in my life 2 weeks earlier. I developed the film when I got home. 38-year-old photographs finally seen for the first time, Fatu, younger than I'd ever known her, laughing at whoever held the camera. My husband's own eye, learning the patience Omar would inherit from a woman he'd never share a single drop of blood with. I understood, looking at those photographs, that grief and love have never actually been opposites. They are the same room, just lit differently. I don't know yet what Omar and I are building. 4,000 miles apart, 37 years between us. Half the world telling us it's foolish before we've even finished explaining it. Some mornings I believe in it entirely. Some mornings I am simply a frightened widow who fell for the first kindness offered to her after unbearable loss. But I know this. I went to Africa to disappear for a while. Instead, for the first time in 14 months, I was found. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from and subscribe if you'd like to hear what happens when I go back.